Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Flex University. My name is Josh Graham. I'm the Group Sales Manager for our Group Consultants, and today we're going to be discussing best practices for forming a small group. This particular presentation was put together based on demand within the brokerage market. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to writing small groups, dealing with the intricacies of what's happening within the individual market and the need for larger networks. So we're really going to go into detail today about how to write a group, what is a group, and as we go through the presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. Just a quick commercial before we jump into the presentation. For those of you that are not familiar with Flex, Flexible Benefit Service Corporation was founded in 1988. We are local in the Rosemont area. We have roughly 75 employees and two primary business focuses. Today we're here talking about general agency and some of the carrier products that we have available, as well as our consumer-driven accounts, so flexible spending accounts, health reimbursement arrangements, HSAs, etc. Within our general agency offering, we tout the fact that we consider ourselves a true general agency. 100% of all commissions are payable to a broker. We do not take a piece of the pie. We provide you free service and support from a sales perspective for all the carriers you see here. For medical, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois, Aetna, and United Healthcare. For our ancillary carriers, we have Dearborn National, MetLife, The Standard, Delta Dental, Principal, as well as VSP, which we have exclusive sheet rates and can write some cases with them that others cannot, and then multiple other lines for individual as well as our Medicare markets. If you have any questions about any of these contracts, please feel free to reach out to your dedicated sales executive. For our TPA services and consumer-driven accounts, we have a brand new platform that was just launched recently around July, and it really has started to streamline the reimbursement and the possibilities for efficiencies within that HRA market as well as FSAs. We're back to doing commuter plans. We can do federal COBRA administration. Many agents I speak with are concerned about compliance, so we have additional services there in regards to wrap documents and premium-only plans. All of our services we can bundle in with a debit card, so a lot of different things that you can utilize Flex for above and beyond our general agency services. We are also an HSA-approved vendor for Blue Cross and Blue Shield on both the group markets, which you'll find us on the benefit program or benefit plan selection form, as well as the individual market within the retail shopping carts. So taking a look at our agenda today, it seems like a very simple question, but what is a group? For many of you that have focused in the individual market, this may be new to you, so I'm going to try to keep it simple as I can. How would we write a group? Can I write this particular group? We get a lot of questions about husband and wife cases, sole proprietors, new businesses, so we'll run through some of those scenarios. And then also best practices for actually submitting those cases through the Flex General Agency. So I've got to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. Each insurance carrier has its own unique administrative, documentation, and underwriting requirements necessary for establishing a group health plan. And as a result, some of the material reviewed today can only be discussed in general terms. Each insurance carrier will make the final determination of an employer's eligibility for establishing a group health plan. After saying that, I am going to do my best to give you as much information as I can. Most of this presentation was built off of personal experience, which I've been here with Flex almost 10 years and dealt with everything pre-ACA and post-ACA, so I'm sure we're going to have a lot of good information for you today. So focusing on what is a group. As I mentioned in the past, the question was easy. You called me up and I would tell you that a group was 2 full-time employees that were working for a company 30 hours or more. As long as you got 2 people to enroll, we could write the group. Unfortunately, due to the ACA and some of the changes with, who governs ERISA here for Illinois, whether it's state versus federal, these situations have become much more complex. And customers are going to be looking to you as agents to satisfy some issues that they're having in the individual market. So it's important that we go into detail about what is a group today. But before we do that, we need to really look at the challenge that presents itself in front of us. So in regards to today's challenges, obviously we have the individual market. In my personal, professional opinion, the number one issue is network access. That's what I hear from brokers daily. People calling me for advice on individual market stuff. Definitely not the expert in that regard, but I have a solution, and that solution is trying to get those individual clients set up on group policies. Many employers don't realize that they can actually help their employees to gain access to those networks without jeopardizing budgets and costs associated with health plans. We don't know within the individual market what carriers are going to be available during open enrollment. Carriers, products, rates, these are all questions that are unanswered at this point. We are going to hurry up and wait until that open enrollment period opens, or we potentially get some window shopping capabilities with some of our carriers. Obviously, number 3 on everyone's mind that I've talked to that has done or dabbled in individual is commissions. Is it worthwhile for me to continue to pursue this business? We're under the impression that there will be commissions payable here for open enrollment, and it is worth your while, but the question of network access still begs our attention. Now, when we talk about a consumer, those individual clients that you may work with on a day-in, day-out basis, the ACA begs to ask the question, does affordable coverage really exist? Many of you may have seen some of the rate increases that have been filed for next year. Most of that is public, and it's going to be interesting to see, I don't know if interesting is the correct word, but what those rates are going to shake out with for 2017. In addition to that, depending on broker and agency decisions on their involvement within that individual market, consumers may struggle to find an expert to help them through this process. It's going to be determined, obviously, based on who's paying commissions and who's going to charge service fees for those individual policies to help clients find that coverage. You're probably going to see less people helping individual clients if it does require a service fee model. So consumers are really going to be looking to people to help them through this process. From what I've heard within the individual market, subsidies obviously are key for a lot of people that can qualify for it, and the time that is spent to determine that subsidy eligibility is enormous. So many consumers are looking for other tax breaks that may be available to them, which in our group markets there are. There are definite tax breaks available and new opportunities that may not be available within that individual market. Most important to us here at Flex is really the producer's needs. I get asked daily, how do I get more prospects within the group market? What can I do to build my business? And while I do that, who's there to support me along the way? I feel like I'm alone. We're going to talk about all these items here today. In addition to this, while you start to build your group market, you got to have good processes in your agency. You've got to be able to do this in an efficient manner. So it's important that we hammer that home as we go through the presentation as well. In addition to that, many of you may have come across competitors that don't even set foot here in Illinois, yet they market after your groups and are successful in taking them in a BOR. One example would be Zenefits. These are organizations that we need to be defensive in our play as a business owner, really focusing on having other electronic solutions that can combat these electronic agencies from coming into your business. And then lastly, compliance. Compliance has become literally a full-time job for many agencies, and when they look to grow their business, they need someone that can help them through that process. Talk about tomorrow's opportunity. This is an often overlooked time of year in which you as an agent can write a voluntary medical policy for a group business. It's unheard of. This started in 2014. Basically, for any of your small clients that would be ACA regulated, if you apply for a policy between November 15th and December 15th for a January 1st effective date, the carriers are required by the ACA to void participation and contribution requirements. meaning I as an employer would not have to pay for the premium, and if I only get one person out of 50, I can still write the policy. This is a very unique situation. Many agents are not aware of it, and in my opinion is a very lucrative opportunity for all agents in the market. To really set this up for you, I want to go through the history of the special enrollment period. In 2014, the health insurance market really started to shift away from group. Many of you remember the individual policies were dramatically lower than the group policies. They were identical in scope. You can go all the same networks. It made sense. In 2014, they continued to shift away. In 2015, our rates did tick up a bit, but that trend really did continue. We dealt with a lot of questions about whether or not we could pre-tax individual policies, run it through an HRA, run it through a premium reimbursement account. A lot of questions in regards to that. Obviously that was finally shut down by the Department of Labor. However, people still made that move to the individual market. In the beginning of 2015, the way everything shook out, carriers really didn't have a solid 12-month period or snapshot of what their claims were going to be. They had to set their rates for January of 2015 in March of 2014. So they had 3 months, which is a lot of times not enough time to even see the claims coming into the carrier, to determine what the rates were going to be for next year. So the rates were still pretty good in 2015. However, when 2016 rolled around, the claims were finally realized, and rate increases went up. And as all of you are aware, many carriers dropped their large networks. So we scrambled to find a solution, which many of you found through Harkin or Land of Lincoln, outside of some of the other carriers. So that was a big challenge for everyone and caused a lot of disruption. We saw a mass exodus from the individual market back to group at that point, and we really expect to see that moving forward into 2017 further, especially with the networks being even more unknown for 2017. We know many of the carriers that accepted full network products last year are now going to limit those networks again this year. So certain counties, you're going to literally need to get into a group in order to see certain hospitals. So we anticipate another challenging open enrollment for everyone, but it's important that we look at all the options out there in the market. And what we found is that many individuals, either A, they own their own business, they're sole proprietors, so they could potentially have access to group markets, or they work for an employer that today doesn't offer coverage. So we want to take a look at that. So as I mentioned, this opportunity is literally unprecedented. So when we talk about companies that don't offer insurance today in the Illinois market, roughly 65% of these businesses would account for that population. So when we talk about special enrollment period for companies that don't have to pay and don't have to worry about participation, you're able to now market to the groups that you would typically turn away in past years. Many of the individual employees that went on their own and got their individual policies, they did find refuge in that reconstructed individual market, but now they're in trouble and they're going to struggle to find coverage. And really, making them aware of what an employer can do to help them gain access to these networks is going to be huge. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what we've done to support our agents and capitalizing and building that particular pipeline for this open enrollment. So the number one question that a lot of these groups are going to have is, well, what does it cost me? What is it going to cost the employer? And as I've mentioned, on the left-hand side, you have traditional enrollment, which is going to deal with multiple employees, paper stacks up to your ears, or you can look at the special enrollment and say, how do I create efficiencies and do it at no cost? Our suggestion to you as agents, start prospecting immediately. As I mentioned, Flex has put together a letter that you can take to all of your individual clients that you can co-brand in your office and send out. And this letter explains to that employee's employer about this special enrollment period and how they can utilize it to their advantage. And the reason that we put this together to begin with was the fact that, in my opinion, an employer is going to be more willing to listen to their employee than you as an insurance agent coming in the front door. So we're using a backdoor approach to make them aware of what's available and a need from their employee that they can solve and create better morale, less turnover within an organization, and be able to offer something to an employee. On top of that, there's tax savings for that employer. You set up a cafeteria plan at Section 125 and allow the employees to pay for their premiums on a pre-tax basis, which is not available on the individual market, and the employer is going to share in that savings through their payroll liabilities. So this is a huge opportunity, and just for you attending this webinar, we're actually going to provide a copy of that letter. So through our follow-ups, we're going to send that to you so that you can utilize it and start building your pipeline now for this open enrollment. The second piece I want to talk to you about this morning is literally using softwares to support your efforts and create efficiencies. Now, for many people, that means change. It means a learning curve. And your time to learn is closing quickly. You have time right now. We're not open in open enrollments. Many of you may be dealing with your 12-1 renewals, but you have to focus your efforts and find different solutions that are going to create efficiencies. Within our organization, we have found one that we find to be the absolutely best solution for you as agents in the small group market. This is Blue Directions by Blue Cross and Blue Shield. It is a free service that is available to all brokers that can allow you to take a group from quote to card without ever having to set foot in their office. So let me throw an example out to you. We deal with a number of groups that we've written over the years, 1, 2 life groups with our agents. Those 1 to 2 life groups will take you literally the same amount of time that it does to enroll a 20 life group. This platform can allow you to go from start to finish remotely or directly across the table from that employer and finish and finalize and then eventually have ID cards out to employees. And the time spent to load a case, once you have this down, it literally takes 15 minutes. So if you can spend 15 minutes on a 1 to 2 life group importing through some of these electronic solutions and save your time, you can really start building that pipeline. Many agents I've talked to are already collecting census data, so as soon as quotes are ready, they're running them. It's important that you do that ahead of time because you're not going to have time once the storm hits to go after this. So be proactive and plan ahead. But Blue Directions is literally one of the best services that we've seen that costs nothing. Now, there are others out there that you can pay for a subscription and can do similar items, ultimately collecting the electronic data, but there still is a paper process to get it to whoever you do business with, which is why our recommendation is Blue Directions. Now, keep in mind, your window to utilize this special enrollment period is only 1 month's time. So my suggestion is to have these cases ready to submit November 15th so that you can continue to churn those cases through that entire month period. I think we were submitting around December 15th close to 40 cases a day the last few days of that open enrollment. So it gets really busy and really backed up, and utilizing that Blue Directions platform can avoid some of those backlogs because you can do all the data entry yourself and not wait in queue for your turn with a scrubber to get into the carrier. On top of that, some of these softwares will actually allow you to cross-sell ancillary. For example, Blue Directions will give you access to Principal, Guardian, and Dearborn National on an electronic basis, cross-sold through a Blue Cross platform. I don't think we've ever seen any carriers that cross-sell that in this small group market space. So it's a way for you to build some additional revenues that are definitely needed right now with some of the commission uncertainties. So let's go ahead and jump into, really the meat of this presentation, which gets involved with how can I rate this group. And, to me, in order to, once again, maintain efficiencies within your agency, it's going to be important that we utilize some specific knockout questions just to determine if this group is really going to qualify in today's regulations. So the first thing that I always ask for brokers to look for is, can you present to me a quarterly wage and tax report? People that have not worked in the group market may not be familiar with this, but I took a snapshot for you. This is what a wage and tax looks like, and there's 3 items that you need to identify with. The first you see on the left-hand side is the quarter. Come January 1st, the most recent quarter you'll have available to provide to an underwriter will be your 3rd quarter wage and tax. that third quarter is going to be over here in about 2 weeks. And when we get to a little bit further in this presentation, you're going to understand why I'm stressing that 2-week period coming up. On the bottom, on the left-hand side, it shows you the number of W-2s that are issued each month within that particular quarter. We use this on a bunch of different reasons. First of all, it identifies what market you're going to fall into potentially for that quarter. The carriers are always looking back 1 year. For a January 1st effective date, they're going to be looking back at your average size for the group from January 1st of 2016 through the end of the year. If you're looking at 12-1 cases, it would be January 1st of 2015 through the end of the year. So they're always looking 1 year back. On the right-hand side, you'll see listed out all the different employees that have been paid within that particular quarter. What the dollar amount was, it'll list their Social Security number. For some carriers, they require that we annotate this wage and tax, meaning you got to reconcile it for any employee that's full-time, part-time, terminated, seasonal, potentially union that are being excluded from coverage, etc. That needs to be marked next to each employee's name when you submit a new case. So it's important that you do that. But if an employer is unable to provide any type of quarterly wage and tax report, that could be your number one red flag. Doesn't mean you can't write it, but it could be a red flag. So that's the first question that I identify with when I'm looking for a group. Second question you should look at is if you're talking to an owner of a business and they say, yeah, I have a quarterly wage and tax report, you want to identify whether or not there's anyone else employed there at the organization for the previous calendar year. And basically that has to be, basically anyone other than a spouse. Spouses are not going to count in this situation. When you look at a business, an owner and a spouse are technically not employees of the company. You can also lump in partners. Partners, owners, and spouses are not considered employees of a company. And what that means to you is, well, how do I identify an employee? First of all, they should be listed on that wage and tax. But if they're not listed on the wage and tax, there may be other reasons for it. What we found through dealing with this last year at open enrollment, some carriers will actually look at dependent children as an employee if they've been working for that company part-time. Maybe a kid's come in and done some administrative work, filing, whatever it might be. If you paid them a wage in the state of Illinois, you would have them listed on a quarterly wage and tax report. When it comes to January 1st business, if you can show that you had someone on a quarterly wage tax report and answer the question from the previous year that you had one employee, which a child would count in that situation, then you would potentially qualify as a group for some of our carriers. So having that employee on payroll is huge. I mentioned there's a 2-week period right now before the end of the quarter. That's all I'm going to say about that. Some carriers don't care if the employee is benefit eligible, meaning you could have one owner and another employee, not a spouse or a partner, that works part-time for the organization, but is being paid, is really working, and they would be considered a group. And you could write that one owner on a policy. One of the most common questions is, well, can I write a one-life group? You can actually do this all year. You don't have to wait for this special enrollment period to do it. However, when you talk about groups that have more employees and there's not going to be any contributions, obviously you would need to wait for that special enrollment period. So I kind of hit home already in regards to the bottom point. Did you have one person for most business days in the prior calendar year? Ultimately, it's a little vague in how it's asked. How do you define most business days? The carrier doesn't do it. They typically are going to take your word for it. But just note that they could come back and ask for all the previous quarterly wage and tax reports for that particular year. So you would need to be able to show that you had people on payroll. So one of the additional questions we get often is, what if I start up a new organization? And I personally see this happening more and more. There are people going to, the old business.com and setting up a corporation with the sole purpose of gaining access to the group market space. Now, they've obviously still have to be a legitimate company. And there's some different questions that are asked of newly formed businesses. One of the things that we ask for, our first question is, do you have a quarterly wage and tax report? Well, if you're a new business, you're obviously not going to have that because you've not been in business for that first quarter. So in lieu of that quarterly wage and tax, many carriers will look for some of the following documentation. Whether or not you have your articles of incorporation, that would typically be for your S corps. Whether or not you have your articles of organization, that would typically be for your LLCs. The Secretary of State sends out a letter once you've filed your federal tax ID to employers saying that you're ready to do business and you're in good standing with the state of Illinois. We refer to that as a Jesse White letter. That will be sent to them once they're a legitimate business. The IRS form SS4, this is the application to file for a federal tax ID. That can be used to prove that this is a legitimate business. Ultimately, they're going to want to see payroll for the first 2 weeks for the people that are eligible. Potentially you have owners that have not been paid yet. Those particular owners can show, a letter on company letterhead that this is a brand new business and they haven't been paid, and support that with an owners and officers form. Some of the carriers use different forms, but basically that shows that this person's not going to be on a wage and tax, and that they may be deferring compensation until the business is profitable. That's very common. Ultimately, if it's a new business, you want to list out the full-time eligible employees, just saying, dear carrier, here is a list of all of my full-time employees working 30 hours or more. List out their names and provide all the other documentation you see, and that list of names would be what the carrier would utilize to determine whether or not you're meeting participation. So anyone you list there, you would need to collect an application or a waiver for when you go through that new business process. One of the interesting things when we talk about newly organized businesses, because one of the challenges I mentioned is basically asking, did you employ at least one other employee for most business days in the prior calendar year? Well, that only applies to groups that have been in business. With new businesses that start up, the question changes. It says, how many employees do you expect to employ for the remainder of the calendar year on most business days? Chances are you're going to be able to say one in that question if you just started your new business. And that's what they're looking for to qualify you as a group, is that you're going to have employees. If you're an existing company, they want to prove that you've had employees. So it's a little bit different depending upon that particular question. So I've got to say that this next slide is really where we've had most of our questions. And it is a slippery slope and a tricky situation, and you really have to have your ducks in a row when trying to qualify a group if it's truly just a husband and a wife. As I mentioned earlier, an owner, husband and wife are not considered employees of the company. So when you start asking the questions in the previous year or moving forward, do I expect to have any employees or did I have any employees, you're not going to be able to say yes because technically they're not employees. So your answer to that would be 0. There are some carriers that will write a husband and wife case. I can tell you right now, Aetna and United won't touch it. Blue Cross will potentially entertain it, but you do have to have all the right supporting documentation. So your knockout question for this particular situation is, can I provide a 1065 K1 to support a true partnership? Now, a true partnership is often confused. A true partnership in the eye of the carrier is going to be someone that has a share of ownership within the corporation. There's no specific percentage that has to be shared, but they have to be able to show some type of share of ownership. And it has to be documented through a partnership K1, a 1065 K1. We got in some trouble last year talking about this because the carriers really didn't understand it at the time, and they said as long as you have a partnership and you can show a K1, we can write the husband and wife. Well, it turns out the type of K1 became our issue. There are shareholder K1s, there are dividend K1s, and there are partnership K1s. The 1065 is the code. If you Google it, just search 1065 K1, you can see exactly what it looks like. I actually have a slide here coming up to show you. But I would stress that you can provide a partnership agreement, that you can provide the 2015 K1s, And if you can do all that, there is a checkbox on that carrier's application that asks if you are a partnership. If you support it with the owner's officers forms, the K-1s, and the the partnership agreement, you can write a husband and wife case. Like I said, this is not for all carriers. If you have questions on this, and I suggest if you do have this type of case, you do reach out to your sales reps here at our organization, and we can kind of support you through that process as we went through a ton of them last year. So that kind of hammers home the husband and wife situation. This is kind of a snapshot of that form, and I highlighted the section that you need to look for. At the top left-hand corner, you're probably familiar with this. It shows a Schedule K-1, Form 1065, and it literally says partner share of income deductions and credits. For some of your other forms, you may see K-1s. The most common is probably your 1120S. That is for a shareholder's share of income. The 1065 is typically going to apply only to LLCs and LLPs. So another disqualifier is if your organization is an S corporation or a C corporation. You would not qualify as a true partnership in those situations. So I hope this helps kind of hammer home the husband and wife situation. It is tricky. It can be done, but you just got to be careful and set the expectations of that particular customer correct on the front end. So now let's go ahead and focus on, efficiencies within your organizations means efficiencies within our organizations, so we really need to work well together. And we have some different small group submission best practices that I want to go through. So first of all, submitting a clean case on your end means that we can burn through it faster on the data entry side and get that welcome letter out to you quicker. If you go through Blue Directions, you submitting a clean case through Blue Directions means it'll turn around quicker automatically without us having to touch it as a scrubbing team. So we've created internally checklists for each one of the carriers that we represent that identifies everything you need to submit a clean case. It's important that you provide all that documentation at the time of submission to avoid any delays with the processing. You're going to come through us as a sales team first. We're going to identify any major items that are missing before we can submit it to the new business team. So us getting a clean case ensures that a scrubber gets eyes on it quicker. General information required, and obviously this is going to vary by carrier, but there's going to be employer-level applications. Some carriers have 1, some carriers have 4. It just varies by carrier. You are going to need employee applications or potentially an enrollment census if it's allowable by that particular carrier. Enrollment census is a great way to get that case in quicker and the data is clean. Also, some carriers will require a quarterly wage and tax report. Some will waive it depending on the size of enrolled, but that quarterly wage and tax report is important. If we don't get that ahead of time with the group, we don't know what questions to truly ask when it comes to submitting that case. So it's important that we receive that, and it's also important that, as I mentioned earlier, that it's reconciled so we know who to look for full-time and what employees have waivers or applications. On top of that, prior carrier bills and renewals, potentially depending on the size of the case, may or may not be required. That bill is important, especially if we're doing any type of ancillary groups, because it'll help waive potentially some of the waiting periods for dental and things like that. So please try and get a copy of that for us. It actually really helps us during the quote process to provide that information so we know what you have, and our sales reps can come back and advise what looks good and if we're really competitive in certain situations. Once that is submitted to our new business team, that means you cleared the sales team and we've sent it over to new business to go through with a fine-tooth comb. One of those specialists is going to literally dig through it to identify that missing information. We are trying to turn around those cases in about 24 to 48 hours, but as we get towards that end of that 12-15 date, our volumes are enormous. And it's going to take us longer than 24 to 48 hours to get through that scrubbing process with you. So the sooner you can get the cases in, the better for us and the better for you and your clients as well. Once we go through that scrubbing process, we're going to provide one list of applications. Basically, that list is going to identify everything that's missing for that particular client. It's important that when you go through this process and you get that list of missing info from our scrubbers, the new business team, please respond in chain to those emails with the full list of missing information on the first shot. That's going to ensure that we get everything entered right away and we don't have to have any back and forth in regards to the missing info. Now, obviously, sometimes information received from you as an agent may prompt additional questions. We'll do our best to avoid that if possible, but really one shot in this process is best for all of us. Once we've gone through everything, you provided all the missing information, you're going to receive an email confirmation that we've received everything, that it has been submitted to the particular carrier, and that we will follow up with you as soon as the welcome letter is available. Depending on the carrier, those welcome letters, especially mid-year, have been flipping in less than 24 hours for this small group market space, which is really convenient for you. Sometimes the ID cards take a little bit longer, but we're hopeful with the new system that's going to continue. As I mentioned, Blue Directions can facilitate that as well. It's a huge tool for us. So, recapping our conversations today, is very important. Number one, this is going to be your busiest time of the year. You're already been sent, the 12/1 renewals. You're trying to burn through those as quick as possible. We're probably 3 weeks away from getting our largest renewal set, which is going to be your 1/1 renewals, and it's going to be insane. Insane in a very good and lucrative and opportunistic way, but it is going to be extremely busy. So that's really why we're putting on this presentation, to help get you guys prepared for that. It's important that you do market towards your individual clients now, because I literally see the uncertainties in the individual market leading to opportunities within the group market where we have stable commissions, large networks, tax advantages, so many reasons to get them back to group products. It's important to start talking to them now, get the census built, so as soon as the quotes are available, we can go ahead and go to market for you. Then, in addition to that, look at ways to create efficiencies within your office. How are you going to be sound in your process in filling out applications, dealing with employer clients? I really implore you to look at some of those electronic solutions that I mentioned today as ways to speed up your process internally within your organization. Definitely refresh yourself with our solutions within our website. We have a ton of support opportunities for you as agents. We have recorded videos to help you, healthcare reform sections. We're updating constantly all of our forms and brochures and materials for all of our carriers based on certain market segments. That's at your fingertips and available 24 hours a day. It's only going to help you be quicker to get back to your client going through some of that. So make yourself aware of what's available out there. I would say utilize us to the best of our abilities to really help you through some of these more detailed questions. And I think as you get through a couple of these, you're going to become experts and really get your foothold in the market here for groups. So first of all, I want to thank you for attending and now open it up for any questions. I know we have a few that have come through, but go ahead and type those questions into your chat function on the right-hand side of the screen, and I will answer those one-on-one as we go through the Q&A section. All right, one of the questions just came in, why are you talking so much about Blue Directions? Which I love, actually, because literally, like I said, I think it's one of the best end-to-end solutions and cross-selling capabilities for brokers in the market. You're literally able to sit in front of your clients and show them the exact cost, map it directly to all of your other renewals that may be coming in. We at Flex will provide a one-on-one tutorial for your first case that you want to bring into our office. You can schedule that time with your sales rep. They'll help you through the first one so you understand it, feel comfortable with it. You can reach out to us and we can talk more about that at that time. Question about commissions in the group market space. It's obviously going to vary by carrier. Most of the groups we're talking about today are going to be your smaller cases, 1 to 50 cases. All the carriers are paying commissions. They will vary based upon potentially the size of the group. They will vary based upon how an employee enrolls, potentially, based on, if they're single or if they're covering any dependents. If you have particular questions about a carrier's commission levels, please feel free to contact us, and we'll go ahead and send that over to you. Another question is regard to the letter for your individual clients. We, as I mentioned, are going to send that letter out to you via follow-up email for attending today. And that, I think, is going to be a huge asset to you to start marketing to some of your individual clients and get them moving towards group. Like I mentioned, some of the agents I've already dealt with on this have had some opportunities come up immediately. Love the opportunity to go to those individual clients and retain some commissions. So I think that's going to be huge for everyone, and we'll make sure we get that out to you quickly. Let me see if there are any other questions. All right, what carriers accept group medical plans that enroll as 100% family? I'm not sure if we're talking in regards to, just one family enrolled, so we'd call that still a one-life group, even though they enroll as family. It goes back to the questions in regards to your previous calendar year, whether or not you had an average of one employee. So as long as you can say that, then you could technically enroll just a family into that particular program. We have a situational question. Father and son owners who need insurance and have an employee who does not need insurance due to having spousal coverage. Can the owners alone be covered? In that situation, if it's father and son, they're both working full-time hours, then yes, we can write that particular case even with that additional third employee that is waiving due to spousal coverage. You can actually write that at any time. You'd be at 100% participation. As long as they're contributing to that health plan that meets the carrier's criteria, we could write that at any time. You wouldn't need the special enrollment period that we talked about earlier today. Are any of your carriers offering self or level funding policies? Are all of these fully funded? So everything I've talked about today is definitely fully insured. When we anticipate individuals moving to group, we anticipate they're going to be smaller businesses in most situations and would not qualify for level funded products. That being said, Flex does offer 3 different level funded approaches. Blue Cross has one through, basically you have to have 25 enrolled in order to get access to that particular product. Aetna and United will have a product that allows if you have 10 enrolled. So you can talk to your sales reps and we can get you more information on that. All right, I have a question. When both owner and wife are on wage reports as employees, basically, once we talked about this earlier, the husband and wife are not considered employees. And if they're not in a situation where they are a true partnership, regardless of them having taxable wages on a quarterly wage and tax, we would not be able to write that case. It would not qualify. So if it's truly just a husband and wife, it has to be that scenario where I mentioned you're a true partnership. And that is carrier dependent as well. Was the information presented applicable to other states or just Illinois? We're specifically talking about a few states in particular. When we talk about the special enrollment period for small groups, that's an Affordable Care Act law, so that is all states. Depending upon the carrier in certain states, they definitely could have other underwriting requirements. So when we get into intricacies with one life groups, that is really going to be specifically here local in Illinois. We've heard an LLC or LLP is not a true partnership for the Blues. Is that not your understanding? LLCs, in particular, can file their taxes in 2 different ways. They can file as a partnership, which is what the carrier is looking for, or they can file as a corporation. Most LLCs are filed as corporations. So instead of having that 1065K1, they would have an 1120S, which would be a shareholder's K1. A shareholder's K-1 is not going to pass the requirement to write a husband and wife case. So that's probably where the misunderstanding is, but if you're a true partnership, then they will look at those. All right, we have a couple more here. Question about how Flex as a general agency can support the Blue Direction submissions. Like you as an agent, we actually can see everything that you put into the system, so we can kind of support you along the way if you run into any issues. On top of that, we can reach out to there's an actual team of Blue Directions that can support any questions as regards to status updates. There are new status updates available in the system now. You used to be able to only see when a case was finalized. You're actually able to see now when a case is approved, and then a welcome letter ensues quickly after that. So we are able to check status in that way, and we have some internal resources if we haven't heard anything of where to go to get additional information on those Blue Directions cases for you. And one question is, Flex, do we work in all states? We are contracted in all states. There's a couple that we can't do business with and a few that don't have product for where we do business. We're able to write nationally as a general agency for Aetna and United Healthcare. Our GA contracts for Blue Cross reside in Illinois and Texas. And then I guess to piggyback off that, our ancillary contracts we can write nationally with Principal, Standard, and MetLife. So we can write any size case anywhere in the country with those three carriers. Okay, I think that's going to wrap it up here this morning. I want to thank you all once again for attending our presentation. I look forward to supporting you through your efforts here at Open Enrollment. I look forward to the chaos and the opportunity that presents itself for us, and I'm really looking forward to you guys establishing yourselves in the group market if you haven't already, and growing your businesses through this open enrollment and the opportunity that presents itself. So once again, thank you very much for attending. Have a fantastic day, and give your sales reps a call with any questions. Thank you.